Hello and welcome to round 6 here at Pro Tour, Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, this is Simon Gertson, and our feature match players are ready and raring to go. We've seen a whole host of power in Modern already. We're going to get a chance to see a little bit more as we head back down to our feature match area for round 6. Hello and welcome to round 6 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. I'm Tim Willoughby, Simon Gertson by my side, and we're going to get a chance to see a little bit more modern action as we work our way through day 1 of our 3-day event here in Bilbao, Spain. We're going to get a chance to see two great players of the game. Dave Williams of the USA, he is on 5-color humans, one of the most popular decks in the format, and in spite of the fact that, you know, Spain in the summer can be blaring hot, it looks like moving away from Vegas, he's feeling the chill a little bit here in his coat, and he's up against Gerry Thompson from the USA, a Pro Tour champion quite recently, and he's on a very interesting looking list. He's on Mardu Pyromancer. So a slightly different take on potentially sort of a variation of humans, if you will, but it means that because he's not trying to do as many things with colors, he gets to run cards like Thoughtseize, and we see this on the very first turn. Thoughtseize, it's costing him a few life to cast between having used a fetch land there and bringing into play a Blood Crypt, so he's taken a whole host of damage, but he gets to see exactly what's going on the other side of the battlefield. There are no 1-drops, 2 Reflector Mages, Thalia herself, along with Thalia's Lieutenant. What's your pick here, Simon?
Well, I think Thalia's Lieutenant, you're not facing too much pressure, and that actually takes the most powerful card away from David Williams. Reflector Mage is not a card that's particularly good against Mardu Pyromancer. You could argue about Thalia, but I would just probably take the Lieutenant depending on your hand.
So it looks like he has gone to Thalia, and you mentioned depending on the hand. Let's have a little look at the hand that Gerry Thompson is working with here. He's got a few spells to work with. Faithless Looting obviously works very nicely with Lingering Souls. You can put it in the graveyard immediately if you so choose, then sort of mitigating some of the downside of discarding. And then on top of that, you do have Young Pyromancer to get triggered and create even more creatures. Now, Dave Williams found a Champion of the Parish on turn 1 on the top of his deck. Obviously, you can't discard the top card of your opponent's deck. You can't stop that sort of thing. And that means that Dave is going to be able to have a pretty sizable threat entering the red zone from this very second turn of the game. Swinging in for 3 with Champion of the Parish, who's only going to get larger with each and every human that Dave plays from here on out.
Yeah, Gerry Thompson is suffering from the Thoughtseize curse. You Thoughtseize somebody, they don't even have a 1-drop. You take the 2-drop that you think is the most scary, and then somehow they draw the perfect curve anyway.
And between the cost of Thoughtseize damage and fetch land damage, Gerry Thompson already at 12 life. Amazing how quickly those life totals can go down when you're using fetch land into dual land. And I guess that's one of the secret strengths of the humans list, is that where other decks are having to jump through quite a lot of hoops in order to make sure that their mana works out, as long as you're willing to concede to the fact that you have to be playing lots of humans and not other creature types, you get to have this perfect mana base that's not costing you any life whatsoever.
Yeah, and here we now see the reason for not wanting to play against Thalia. Gerry can actually play a Faithless Looting, discard Lingering Souls, and flash it back in the same turn. I wanted to mention that this Mardu Pyromancer deck is actually not one that has been big in real-life events, but there are a few players on Magic Online that play this deck religiously, and they are playing it to very good success. One of the trophy leaders in the Magic Online competitive leagues in Modern is always playing Mardu Pyromancer. So this is kind of a deck that, from the online results, is looking very promising, but it doesn't have the big results from real-life tournaments.
Though potentially, of course, this is where that could all change. Gerry Thompson of Team Metagame Guru's son, a very, very powerful mage indeed. And he's got a lot of creatures on the battlefield here, and the good thing for him about that is it means that he can potentially put a never-ending or seemingly never-ending stream of blockers in the way of the larger creatures of Dave Williams, though Dave with Reflector Mage can make the most of the fact that those tokens, if bounced, will be gone for good. Dave Williams, he's got a Meddling Mage in hand, and Meddling Mage, an interesting one. It interacts very nicely with cards that let you look at your opponent's hand, but equally, there are various cards in Gerry Thompson's graveyard that he'd very much like to cast, and wherever they get cast from, Meddling Mage can potentially make that difficult. As things stand, though, Reflector Mage dealing with the Pyromancer in play for Gerry Thompson for 2 turns, effectively, as it comes down.
Yeah, and unsurprisingly, you don't want that Pyromancer to stick around. David is offering a rather good trade here for Gerry. Getting rid of a lieutenant with just 2 tokens is actually quite potent.
Yeah, those tokens virtually free for Gerry Thompson, only needing to have to invest in having a young Pyromancer in play and then casting a few spells to get them. And he's picked up another land here that means that he can potentially play a few spells this turn. Obviously, he won't have a Pyromancer to trigger them, nor can he cast one this turn, but this is sort of the cool thing that happens in Modern that you don't necessarily see so much in Standard, that you can very realistically have curves that are very low indeed and plan on casting just a few spells in a single turn.
And Gerry has been able to cast 2 spells on turn 3, and he will cast 2 spells again this turn. So generating quite a bit of tempo, which is important against the Reflector Mage deck. I expect Liliana to come down here, and Gerry will have to decide how how aggressively he wants to protect her.
Well, this Thoughtseize relatively aggressive, considering it puts Gerry Thompson down to just 4 points of life now. That Champion of the Paris is a lethal threat from the rest of this game, so I would not imagine there's a huge amount of life gain available to Gerry Thompson here. And he gets to again look at Dave Williams' hand and decide what it is that he would like to take from it. Goes for the Meddling Mage there. The original artwork of Meddling Mage featuring Chris Bakula from Planeshift many moons ago at this point, and Liliana comes down. Immediately the -2 ability forces a sacrifice of a creature from Dave Williams, who decides that he wants to keep around that Champion of the Parish.
Very understandable. It's already a 4/4, so it's threatening lethal by itself, which is why we should never see it attack Liliana. It's just a threat that has to be blocked anyway, so you should definitely attack the player instead.
Yeah, a lot of work to be done to finish Dave Williams off at this point. 17 life, a fair amount to work with as he sacrifices a Horizon Canopy to draw another card. A little bit flooded, it must be said, Dave Williams. He's got quite a few lands to work with. Another Thalia's Lieutenant, though, pumping the Champion of the Parish up just a little bit more. And, of course, it was already a lethal threat, but when it attacked in, it also was able to make sure that Gerry Thompson lost one of those spirits.
Horizon Canopy is one of these lands that help you to not flat out with the human stack, but this is the one big weakness. It's super disruptive and aggressive, but if it would never flat out, it would be unbeatable. So that's kind of the hope that you have to have playing against humans is, in the end, this deck will not draw this with the same threat density than some other decks. It's not like Burn, where every card is just 3 damage, basically, every non-land.
So there we see Young Pyromancer finally coming back, along with Lingering Souls. That's 3 tokens being created from just the 1 Lingering Souls, 2 Spirits, and 1 Elemental. And we've heard our first game update. Piotr Gorski is up against Philip Krieger and was able to pick up that first game. Gorski, somewhat unsurprisingly, on Lantern Control, though possibly surprisingly the first person to get a win in these rounds in the feature match. Piotr
is actually playing War of Invention Lantern, so he has, or he should have, a main deck Grafdigger's Cage. And playing against Dredge in the hands of Philip Krieger, that can actually decide the game very quickly in game 1.
So Reflector Mage here bouncing that Young Pyromancer for the second time in the game. Young Pyromancer struggling to stay on the board, and Reflector Mage showing the power level that was ultimately enough to cause it to get kicked out of Standard for a little bit. And already, Champion of the Parish, for a 1-drop, just represents such a colossal amount of damage from this human stack.
Yeah. It's not easy for a 3 mana, 2-power creature to make it into Modern. But Reflector Mage has done so.
And Gerry Thompson here, he's got a Lightning Bolt along with a few other bits and pieces. Starts things off with Flashback on that Faithless Looting. Draws into another Thoughtseize, but at this point, the time for Thoughtseizing is all done, and uses his remaining mana on Lightning Bolt. And That means he's able to clear the board off with the help of Liliana. And now comes the point where Gerry Thompson can start attacking. He just kind of has to hope that Dave Williams doesn't have anything too threatening on the top of his deck. There we see Kitesail Freebooter taking a...
Do you have any flashback cards? None.
Collective brutality there he's taken out there, which is unfortunate because Collective Brutality, one of the few ways that Gerry Thompson had of maybe winning back a little bit of that life that he'd lost while simultaneously potentially killing one of the human's deck's creatures.
And Kitesail Freebooter is even threatening Jerry's life total in a relevant way. The 1 damage of Kitesail Freebooter can be enough in conjunction, for example, with a Mantis Rider to represent lethal.
Mantis Rider would have been a lovely top deck, but it's only an Ancient Ziggurat for Dave Williams, so he's got to settle for just the single point of damage per turn. And if Gerry Thompson can start getting something going this next turn or two, then he may be able to turn this around. He picked up a Blood Moon for the turn, which is kind of an interesting one in this matchup because traditionally Humans does not have all that many basics, and right now Dave Williams forced to play as a red-white deck. Very fortunate to have found that Plains because it means that his hand not entirely locked down and he is able to play that Thalia, Guardian of Thraben.
And there might only be a single Plains or maybe 2 basics in his deck list, so that's actually huge. You don't have many main deck Blood Moon decks, but this is one of them.
Kolaghan's Command, the pickup for Gerry Thompson. This is another way that he can get value by potentially dealing with a couple of threats all in one go here. He is forcing a discard from Dave Williams while killing off Kitesail Freebooter, getting back his Collective Brutality. And that was his way of hedging against Williams potentially having something in hand that he was building up to be able to cast here. Because with only 1 white source, it's very easy to imagine a situation where Williams could have multiple good white cards in hand and have to gradually place them on the battlefield turn after turn.
Yeah, very nice card to ensure that David doesn't have a lot of life draws from here on out. Of course, the majority of his humans are still mono-white, but if you can only cast a third of them, then even Champion of the Parish or Thalia's Lieutenant are not as scary.
Blood Moon, one of the key cards in Modern, I would say. One of the ways of keeping people honest if they are trying to do things with the more impressive lands in the format.
And you are keeping quite a few decks honest. You're keeping humans honest, but you're also keeping Tron and Scapeshift relatively honest. There is even an argument that sometimes it's exactly the card you want against Affinity, even if it's just to shut down their creature lands.
So Collective Brutality getting cast with Escalate there, killing off the 1 creature in play for Dave Williams, also giving Gerry Thompson a tiny amount of additional life. But you know what? Going from 2 to 4 potentially is giving him an extra turn. While Mantis Rider can quite happily deal 3, that 4th point of damage is a bit trickier. And Inquisition of Kozilek meaning that Kitesail Freebooter in hand for Dave Williams, unable to be cast. I'm not sure if it's actually possible for Dave Williams to cast Kitesail Freebooter at all once Blood Moon has been played. And Blood Moon, a gigantic beating in that game there. It was just something where from nowhere, Gerry Thompson was able to shut down almost everything that Dave Williams was able to piece together in game 1, in spite of an incredibly potent start from the Humans deck.
Yeah, and it wasn't really the Blood Moon that won the game. It was the combination of defensive tokens plus Liliana plus spot removal to run David Williams out of gas.
And we will, of course, get a chance to see how Dave Williams tries to bounce back in games 2 and potentially 3 soon enough. Indeed, some look-ins in our other games as well. But first, these messages.
So Magic the Gathering Arena, we chose that word arena very particularly because an arena is a place where people gather, where people come to compete, where people come to spectate and cheer on their favorites. It really is a place where the whole community can come together and experience the very best of what Magic has to offer.
Hello and welcome back to this round 6 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. While our main match players are just finishing their sideboarding, Gerry Thompson and Dave Williams figuring out how they want to reconfigure for their game 2, we're going to get a chance to look in on one of our other matches from the feature match area, that being between Philip Krieger on the left of our screen and Piotr Gorski on the right. We have two decks with very different game plans here. On the left, we have Philip Krieger on Dredge. Meanwhile, Piotr Gorski, who is on Lantern Control, he's already got a Grafdigger's Cage in play and has just had the opportunity to play Whir of Invention to fetch up an Ensnaring Bridge. This is how the Lantern Control deck is looking to close the game down.
Yeah, and now he does have to empty his hand as quickly as possible for Ensnaring Bridge to actually take effect.
Yeah, it's like the Dredge decks these days, they're not necessarily trying to get one giant creature into play they can attack with. They're potentially going kind of wide, and that means that the creatures themselves not so big. So getting those cards out of hand can be fiddly. Another Whir of Invention coming down now for Gorski. This one of the big additions to the Lantern Control deck. Originally, this was not an option, but it just offers a certain amount of consistency, redundancy of key answer cards, and also it means that if there are going to be silver bullets, cards that would be very, very potent in a specific matchup, that Gorski doesn't necessarily have to wait until sideboard to have them in his deck.
Also, Piotr, very well protected from even Ancient Grudge at this point, with double Welding Jar and the Grafdigger's Cage already in play. He drew, probably he drew the Grafdigger's Cage naturally, and then used the Whirs to protect it.
Now, as much as this is a Lantern of Insight control deck, ultimately looking to lock opponents out of cards drawn, right now, Piotr Gorski working in the dark and simply doing everything he can to stop the attack steps of Philip Krieger. Ensnaring Bridge, meaning that only creatures with power less than the number of cards in hand that Gorski has able to do much. And you know what? One thing that this deck is very good at is emptying its hand. Most of its cards costing just a single point of mana, or indeed less. Pithing Needle coming down here for Gorski, and potentially meaning that even fewer options available to the German pro.
Yeah. Something that's always nice to see is the speed with which Gorski manages to pilot this deck. It's not an easy deck to play, but he knows it so well that these turns are as fast as you can play them with the Lantern deck.
And it's very important that you achieve that, because the games don't necessarily end quickly in terms of numbers of operations, so you have to do everything you can. Philip Krieger here, he's filling the board, but it's potentially immaterial compared to what Piotr Gorski already has going on. You know what, given that Gerry Thompson and Dave Williams have now finished sideboarding, we are going to jump back to that one, see how that plays out, but we will give you updates as to how this match concludes between Piotr and Philip. It seems to me like Gorski already in great shape, but we will, of course, send you the results from that as and when we hear them. You can see on our back table, Reed Duke and Ben Stark also battling it out in our feature match area. They're both at 4-1 with quite different game plans, but whether or not we'll get a chance to see that will all depend on how quickly the two men on our front table are able to navigate their remaining games. Gerry Thompson already a game up with his Mardu Pyromancer list against Dave Williams. We will find out whether or not he's able to make it 2 on the bounce soon enough. Interesting looking hand here. Bedlam Reveler, not necessarily something that we have seen a whole lot of in Modern, but it's a big way of refueling for a deck, especially one that can make the most of cards in the graveyard.
Yeah, it is one of the cards that make this deck work together with Faithless Looting. And look at this beautiful hand. It's basically a control hand. Lightning Bolt, Collective Brutality, and then once you've used up all your resources, you're going to refuel with Bedlam Reveler.
So Kitesail Freebooter coming down on turn 2 here, and it will be able to snipe something out of Gerry Thompson's hand, but how long for is the question, because there's a lot of copies of Collective Brutality in that hand, and Gerry Thompson at will can basically kill off the Freebooter if he so chooses.
Well, but Thompson is liking some lands, so if David maybe even takes Faithless Looting here, then Gerry might be stuck on one land for quite a long time. I don't really see the point of taking a collective brutality when there are multiple in Gerry's hand anyway.
On turn one? Maybe. I mean, Bolt still kills him unless most turn twos, Bolt still kills him. You know?
So the question there from Gerry of his opponent was, should I have gone with the Faithless Looting on turn one rather than Lightning Bolt? It's definitely a question mark, and when you've just got the one land in hand, hitting the second land, the value in doing so, absolutely gigantic. And there is no second land, but there is Inquisition of Kozilek, meaning that Gerry Thompson getting a chance to repay the favor after Dave Williams was able to take a card out of his hand. Sees a couple of copies of Aether Vial, Thalia's Lieutenant, and a Mantis Rider, all legal targets. Inquisition of Kozilek, so good in Modern because such a large proportion of decks really need very little land to work with. And Dave Williams, off the top, finds the Seachrome Coast he needs to be able to cast Mantis Rider. He gets to swing in for 4 points of damage in the air. That a big top deck for Dave Williams, and it means that Gerry Thompson's time to find a second land growing short.
And he even left the Mantis Rider on the battlefield, announcing to Gerry that he would top deck the right land to cast the Rider. So there was a brutal turn of events for Gerry, who's now facing a board that's actually kind of difficult to deal with.
You're right. You are so right. My bad. So used to having the other one in play. I apologize.
Ancient Ziggurat can only be used to cast creatures, so Dave Williams in a spot where he wasn't quite able to get everything that he wanted to do done there.
Drew a land, so things might happen.
It's not super critical here to have both Aether Vials in play anyway. David just figured he might as well play them out.
Now, Gerry Thompson has found his land for the turn. This a pretty important pickup. He's going to take a little bit more damage, but he has now the ability to cast Dreadbore, dealing with that Mantis Rider. And at some point, you may be able to win a little bit of that life back thanks to Collective Brutality. Lots of cards in hand. That Lingering Soul seems like a prime target to get discarded to escalate the powerful sorcery.
And you maybe want to empty your hand aggressively anyway, because you're already holding Badland Reveler, which it basically punishes you for having too many cards in hand.
Noble Hierarch pumping up that Kitesail Freebooter thanks to Exalted. The other Aether Vial does now come down, and Dave Williams working with an entirely empty hand. But with 2 Aether Vials, he's likely to be able to put into play pretty much whatever he draws from now on, and his deck operating at instant speed now virtually thanks to those 2 copies of Aether Vial.
But now he really has to draw something, and I think that Gerry is stabilizing here. He gets the benefit of being able to cast Collective Brutality with Escalate, gaining some life, getting back his Faithless Looting. He's doing quite well and facing only a single point of damage next turn.
I mean, he's facing a single point of damage for 1 turn, and then when it gets to subsequent turns, he can just remove the Noble Hierarch. And I believe that Dave Williams drew a creature that's relatively low impact on this exact board. Reflector Mage doesn't have any targets to bounce. Obviously, Dave Williams can just wait on using it until he's got his Aether Vials a little bit higher and indeed a target. But with Gerry Thompson on 8, I can imagine there being an attraction to just getting some extra damage on the board.
Yeah, I mean, Reflector Mage is pretty bad in this matchup overall. We've seen it be largely irrelevant in game 1. Here, I could see it take out a Badland Reveler at some point, but do you really want to give your opponent 3 fresh cards when that card has already done its job once?
Another copy of Faithless Looting here for Gerry Thompson. This is how he's going to make sure that he hits subsequent land drops after having had kind of a rocky start in the early stages of this game. And the second copy of Bedlam Reveler that he picked up at the start of this turn seems like a prime candidate to get discarded here, along with yet another Faithless Looting. And Thompson still has enough mana that he can get to cast Collective Brutality, clearing out that board a little bit, and I believe he's gaining still more life here.
2 cards? Yep.
The ability to make opponents discard instants and sorceries likely to be completely redundant in this matchup. Occasionally you see humans decks that run Collected Company, but when you've seen Ancient Ziggurat from your opponent, it tends to signal that that would be a very optimistic mana base.
Absolutely. Thalia comes down here at sorcery speed because David knows that it will be relevant. The taxing effect will be relevant.
quick update on one of our back tables. Reed Duke has already won his match against Ben Stark. Reed Duke on Abzan, or virtually green-black with a little lingering soul splash, able to take down the Jeskai control deck of Ben Stark in 2 games flat. Congratulations to him there, but we were sticking with this one. It seems like a really interesting set of swings between these 2 quite different decks. The Mardu Pyromancer deck able to garner card advantage through the likes of discarding Lingering Souls and using Collective Brutality to get 2-for-1s. And of course this Bedlam Reveler. Mantis Rider from Dave Williams, pretty good, but at this point, even though he's ahead on life, it seems like Gerry Thompson is able to piece a few things together here.
Yeah, and Bedlam Reveler actually only costs 2 red because of the amount of instants and sorceries in Jerry's graveyard.
Confirming what it is, and you said in browse?
I said prowess, and you said yeah, and I said
Oh, I thought you
discard,
said
and you said yeah. I mean, if you want to do something, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I do. I was just processing. God, I fucking hate foreign cards. I'm sorry. I was literally just processing, and I thought you said in browse, and I don't know what that meant. That's just like, okay.
A little bit of communication issues there for Dave Williams. Just wants to make sure that he understands what's going on.
Do something. Yeah, but I understand.
Okay.
This is, of course, a huge difference if there is a 3-4 on the battlefield, or if Jerry is forced to discard the 3-4 with a trigger on the stack.
Yeah, because the first part of the resolution of the enter the battlefield trigger is discard your hand. If you can bounce the Bedlam Reveler before that trigger resolves, then your opponent is forced to discard the Bedlam Reveler. So a much clearer board now for Dave Williams.
Yeah, and this actually makes a huge difference. Actually, to be fair, if he bounces the Reveler end of turn, he's still threatening a very similar line, just that Jerry's outs are significantly reduced.
So Gerry Thompson at just 1 life here and needs to string something together if he's going to stop the twin threats on the other side of things. Casts a Faithless Looting, gets himself an Elemental, but the Mantis Rider in the air still potentially quite a big problem here.
Yep, and he's flooding out. So despite having found lands, he's now under so much pressure again that he's only barely staying alive with the Lingering Souls flashback.
Now, we're unlikely to see those Ether Vials change their numbers from 2 and 3. 2 and 3 kind of the sweet spots for the deck. There's a few 1-drops in there too, but they're obviously not too taxing to simply cast the old-fashioned way. And each and every one of these attacks from Dave Williams, forcing a block from Gerry Thompson.
Yeah, Gerry Thompson very unlikely to trade his Pyromancer at any point. That's the card that's keeping him in the game, allowing him to chump block on the ground without any issues. And of course, every Lingering Souls he finds will delay the game by quite a bit.
Looks like there's a Collar Guns command for Gerry Thompson from his draw step.
That's also a very promising card. You could combine Collar Guns command with your Lingering Soul token to deal a total of 3 to the Mantis Rider, but I think it's more important to get back the Reveler as soon as possible. You don't want to waste any time getting to those extra cards.
Yeah, conveniently you can return the Reveler for 3 mana, 2 mana left. That's easily going to be enough to cast Bedlam Reveler again. And with an empty hand, refuel up to 3 cards in hand. And this is still a scary spot for Gerry Thompson to be in, because he is in a place where if there's a removal effect for that 1 spirit in play, 1 attack step is going to be enough for Dave Williams to square this one up and force a game 3.
Mm-hmm. Although there are not so many removal effects in the 5-color human deck, of course.
Yeah, the 5-color humans deck largely has to rely on putting permanents on the battlefield and kind of hoping that they're good enough, using them to disrupt what's in hand. They're less good at disrupting what's in play. Gerry Thompson suddenly with a whole bunch of cards in hand, and the prowess triggers on Bedlam Reveler mean that it can potentially attack for quite a bit.
This game is all about flying. Gerry actually has Lingering Souls in hand, so in this case, he will actually now just overwhelm the board. At this stage, he will almost always have a blocker for whatever David can come up with, even if there are some responses by him.
Lightning Bolt to deal with Mantis Rider puts him substantially safer at this point. All of this, of course, generating still more elementals. I really like the velocity of Gerry Thompson's deck. When it gets its key pieces into play, it can generate a board advantage pretty quickly.
Yeah, and we saw a pretty nice stack there. Inquisition of Kozilek. In response, activate Ether Vial. In response, Lightning Bolt Mantis Rider, just to be safe. And then, only then was Thalia's Lieutenant allowed to enter the battlefield.
Now, right now, Gerry Thompson has Lingering Souls in hand, but does not have white mana, so he would need to find a way of discarding it if he's going to be able to get flyers into play. But I guess that at least he doesn't 100% need flyers in the same way that he did mere turns ago, simply due to having found the Lightning Bolt for that Mantis Rider.
So the Lightning Bolt was actually fine, yes. He's just still facing lethal if David manages to top deck another Mantis Rider. But as far as I can tell, that's the only threat by David that immediately wins the game. Kitetail Freebooter is also a card to be aware of. Can also be flashed in at instant speed at end of turn.
Williams there draws Kitetail Freebooter, I believe. Oh, no, sorry, Thalia's Lieutenant, I believe. Right on time, he says. Turns out a Grafdigger's Cage, in fact, the pickup. There had already been the Kolaghan's command to return Bedlam Reveler from the graveyard.
I think the graveyard has already done too much damage for Grafdigger's Cage to really be impactful, and Kolaghan's command is a nice way of dealing with an artifact and to do something else. So Grafdigger's Cage doesn't seem like the card David wanted to draw here.
He does put it on the battlefield. It's not doing too much in his hand there. Beyond, I guess, representing the unknown thanks to 2 Ether Vials to potentially mess with what Gerry Thompson has going on. Thompson now, he's got plenty of targets for that Kolaghan's command. All of the modes on it, apart from the discard, at least targeting Dave Williams being live. Though I guess in principle he may also want to target himself with the discard if he can, in order to be able to get rid of the Lingering Souls in his own hand.
But for this case, you would always prefer to just return a Bedlam Reveler to your hand. That will force you to do discard anyway. I think the real decision is whether you shoot the Lieutenant for 2 or if you choose Destroy Target Artifact. I will always return the Reveler here.
Gerry Thompson draws a fetch land. That definitely a card that he does not want to see. On just 1 life, it's not doing a whole lot for him right here. Here's Bedlam Reveler, though. Traded in for something better, hopefully.
Yeah, I saw a Liliana, which is already quite good. It's actually quite potent against the Humans deck if your game plan is to just run them out of threat.
I mean, Dave Williams is operating off the top of his deck at this point. Lingering Souls, I like playing this first. It gives a little bit more safety against the most dangerous of the top decks available to Dave Williams. And Inquisition of Kozilek there simply to create more creatures and more prowess triggers for Thompson.
And Gerry knows that there are not many things that that can still kill him here.
Dave Williams draws and ultimately has to scoop his cards up. Gerry Thompson in each game going incredibly low on life, but finding the win in both cases with his powerful Mardu Pyromancer deck. He advances to 5-1 in this round 6 here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. And if we look at our feature match area, we can see that actually the last of our matches to complete here in the feature match area. Very, very impressed with this Mardu deck in the feature match area here. It seemed like he did have a good plan against the Humans list, and ultimately, when the Humans' initial assault had been blunted, it was quite difficult for Dave Williams to find any way of coming back.
And it wasn't only the deck. It was also Gerry piloting it very, very nicely, going down in life total, but just high enough that he had always had an advantage going forward.
Indeed, fantastic stuff from him. There are, of course, a few more rounds here of modern play in day one of Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan. But before we get on to them, we've got a little bit more news for you from the news desk right after these messages.
Welcome back to the news desk. Rich Hagan and Maria Bartholdi here. Behind us, about 5 minutes left in round number 6. So there's only 2 more today. For those of you unfamiliar with the format and structure, 8 rounds today. Then we do it all again, Maria, tomorrow. But again, the same structure, which means we've only got 2 more rounds of Modern now, and then it's back
to draft.
Yeah, so 3 rounds to 8. If you get to 4 wins or better, that brings you back for day number 2. Now, we've got results coming in. And as I mentioned, going into that round, the top tables are full of players that don't have platinum resumes, don't have Hall of Fame rings. These are people trying to make their mark on the Pro Tour, sometimes for the first time. So let's just mark your card for a few of those, Maria. Where shall we start?
All right, let's start with Adriano Moscato of Italy. So we might remember him from the World Magic Cup. Italy did very well there. He's starting off 6-0 here at the tournament.
Okay, so that's how he gets here. He defeated Elias Watsfeld, who's now 4-1-1. There are plenty of draws floating around. Right now, that's not super important. Tomorrow afternoon, remember that there are a lot of draws around. That's going to make the tie-break math very, very hard for players who are at 11-3, hoping that 12-4 might be enough, or even 12-3, thinking that an intentional draw might be enough. Might not be. All right, so that's Moscato 6-0, Watsfeld 4-1-1. What's next?
All right, we've got John Stern sitting at 6-0. Of course, 8 GP top 8s. He's won 2 of them. 6-0 start. Great way to start.
Right, so yeah, the godfather of Canadian Magic, we call him Atlantic City 2013, Atlanta 2014 were his Grand Prix titles. Now, he has defeated, let's just take a look here, see who he, Yukio Kozakai of Japan, which is not a name I knew. I'm not that surprised I didn't. It's his second Pro Tour, but at the first one, how many match wins? 0. Didn't win a match. May have won some games, but not a match. So one would guess that's typically that's a 0-5, 0-3 in draft, play a couple of rounds of constructed, go, it's not my day, and then you're done. So he's come back a little bit of a reversal. He's now passed, just about past the 50% with that loss. He dips under. If he was 0-5, 5-0, and now 5-1, the hard work starts again for him. All right, what's next?
All right, Michael Lagamba, I love this story. RPTQ winner, 6-0.
Yeah, see, that's fantastic. And also, you think of this as like, oh, you start out and, you know, you're 17 and you get to an RPTQ or whatever, or you're 22. Michael's 30, he's been playing for ages, and here he is, 30-year-old in his first Pro Tour, off the RPTQ success, yet to drop a match. Fantastic job. He defeated Edgar Magalhaes, who was sort of one of the coming forces in Canadian Magic a while back, sort of 5 to 6 years ago. A lot of people thought he really had the chops for it, a lot of Magic Online experience, and then life took a different path, but he's back on the Pro Tour. Having lost to Lagamba, he is now 5-1. What else? Singapore, Zhongyi Lim is up to 6-0, defeating Spain's Israel Rosales, who, honestly, fantastic job. 4 previous Pro Tour starts, a 27% win rate.
Really?
That's like 2-6 every time on average, right? So he's come back
well
in
done.
5-1. Great stuff. Jean-Emmanuel Desprats, the winner of Grand Prix Warsaw, also worth telling you about. He's just dropped his first match to Takaki Suamatsu. But you mentioned the godfather of Canadian Magic,
yes,
Mr. John Stern. We should find out more about him. How? Here's how. Brian David Marshall.
Thanks, Rich. I'm here on the floor with John Stern. John, since you've come back to the Pro Tour, you have been right in the mix of the mega team boot camp preparation, often doing a lot of the logistics for those teams, but a slightly different approach for you for this tournament.
Yeah, for this one I decided to work on my own. It's modern. I have a lot of experience in modern, and I felt that all the logistics work I was doing would have been just better time spent, you know, playing more games and just relaxing a little bit instead of feeling like I have a whole team on my back, sort of, in terms of keeping things going.
So how does that work out for you? Is that just playing Magic Online a lot?
Yeah, I played a lot online. There's a player in Victoria, James Stevenson, who qualified, so we played some games and tried a lot of different decks. But yeah, mostly leagues. That's how I tested.
Now, you're off to a 6-0 start here, which is your best start on a Pro Tour in your career.
As far as I can remember, yeah, I started 5-0 at one of them. But at least in this stint, since I came back to the game, 6-0 is my best start. I haven't 3-0'd that often in the draft, so.
Now, working by yourself, did you get a lot more drafts in than maybe you would, where you're doing all this other stuff in the house?
Ironically, no, because I guess with the team, you sort of have them, they have your back in terms of constructed, so you can focus on that. Also, without the pressure of keeping the team organized, I sort of relaxed a little bit. I did probably like a quarter of the drafts I would normally do. But, you know, I played with Ixalan cards a lot, and hopefully I didn't draft too badly. We'll see.
I mean, 3-0, it seems like it went pretty well. Now, you're on burn in Modern, and I find that there's people play the deck they're playing in Modern for two reasons. They either are like, okay, I've tested thoroughly and I've ended up that this is the best deck, or they're like, ugh, I can't find anything I like, I'll just play Burn. What was the experience like for you?
Well, I started off feeling that Burn would be popular and that maybe some teams, like I know Genesis has played Burn and Midcard has played Burn, so I thought I'd start off playing Burn and see where the weaknesses were, what the good and bad matchups were, and I was winning enough. I mean, I put a lot of time into Dredge and Affinity, and I didn't think either of them were very good right now. And then I tried a lot of other decks, but I wasn't really brewing. I was just playing decks. I wanted to, like, I played with Storm just so I would be better at Storm if I decided to play it at some point. And yeah, I felt really good about Burn, and you know, it's nice to not go to time every round.
Yeah, you get a little bit of time to eat, take care of yourself. What has the field played out as you've looked around at the top tables around you? Has it played out the way you expected?
I predicted that I thought Affinity, Burn, and Tron would be the top 3 decks. I probably underestimated Humans a little bit. I heard that might be the most popular deck. But yeah, basically I've seen a lot of Affinity walking around. I played a Burn Mirror last round at 5-0. So yeah.
All right, John Stern, see if you can keep running up this high score here. Put your name up on the scoreboard here at Pro Tour Rivals of Ixalan.
Thanks so much, BDM. Well, a lot of great decks running around down there on the floor of this Pro Tour. And if you're a Control player, well, the good news is a lot of people are liking Control in Modern now. And Paul Cheon is with one of them over at our video wall.